You go about your daily routine in the manufactorum, processing the same components you've assembled for years. The prayers to the Emperor echo through the hab blocks at dawn, just as they always have. The Arbites patrol the streets with their usual stern efficiency. The planetary governor's face stares down from propaganda posters, promising prosperity through labor and devotion. Everything is as it should be. Everything is as it has always been. But something has changed. You can't quite put your finger on it, but there's a wrongness in the air. A neighbor you've known for 20 years won't make eye contact anymore. The servitors in your sector have been malfunctioning more frequently, their monotone voices occasionally stuttering into sounds that almost seem like screaming. The water from the reclamation systems tastes different. At night, you hear sounds that don't belong in an imperial hive city, sounds that make your skin crawl and your heart race for reasons you cannot explain. You tell yourself it's nothing. You have to believe it's nothing. Because the alternative, the possibility that something fundamental has gone wrong, is too terrifying to consider. So you pray harder. You work longer shifts. You avoid asking questions. You do what good imperial citizens are supposed to do. You have faith in the Emperor's protection. You don't yet realize that faith alone won't save you. You don't know that your world has already begun its descent into something far worse than death. You don't understand that chaos has taken root in your world, and nothing will ever be the same again. In the grim darkness of the far future, there are fates worse than simple death. One of the most horrifying is to watch your entire world slowly consumed by the forces of chaos, to see reality itself twist and corrupt around you, to witness friends and family transform into monsters, and to face a choice between a quick death or eternal damnation. This is not a quick annihilation by Xenos raiders or a clean execution by the Arbites. This is a slow, inexorable slide into madness and corruption that can take months or even years to complete. Chaos corruption is insidious. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare or obvious signs at first. It begins in the shadows, in whispered conversations, in secret meetings held in the deepest parts of underhives and behind the closed doors of noble estates. It spreads like a disease, but not one that simply kills. Instead, it transforms, corrupts, and ultimately consumes everything it touches. The Chaos Gods hunger constantly for mortal souls, and when they turn their terrible attention to a world, that world's doom is all but assured, unless swift and brutal action is taken. The Imperium of Man spans 1,000,000 worlds across the galaxy, and on countless thousands of these worlds, chaos cults work in the darkness, preparing for the day when their gods will reward them with power and transformation. Most of these cults are discovered and purged before they can cause catastrophic damage. The Inquisition's agents work tirelessly to root out heresy. The Arbites maintain order through fear and violence, and the ecclesiarchy preaches the Emperor's divinity to billions upon billions of souls. But sometimes, through incompetence, bad luck, or the sheer determination of the cultists, a world falls too far before anyone in authority realizes what's happening. When that occurs, the inhabitants of that world experience something that defies description. They watch as their reality crumbles piece by piece. The laws of physics that govern their existence begin to fail. The dead don't stay dead. The sky changes color. Time itself becomes unreliable. And through it all, they must make impossible choices about survival, about morality, about what they're willing to do to protect themselves and those they love. The seeds of corruption, how it starts. Chaos corruption doesn't begin with demons materializing in the town square or reality tearing apart. It begins much more quietly, much more insidiously. It begins with people who are desperate, angry, afraid, or simply curious about powers beyond the Imperium's rigid doctrine. It begins in the dark corners where the Emperor's light doesn't quite reach, where his protection seems like an empty promise rather than a tangible reality. The Imperium of Man is a deliberately oppressive regime. It has to be. With 1,000,000 worlds to govern, and countless threats both internal and external, the Imperium maintains control through fear, faith, and overwhelming force. Life for the average Imperial citizen is one of grinding labor, minimal comforts, and constant surveillance. You work until you're too old or injured to be useful, and then you're processed into corpse starch to feed the next generation of workers. Your children are taken for military service or labor assignments. Your thoughts are monitored for heresy. Your every action is scrutinized for signs of deviation from the approved norms. This oppression, while necessary from the Imperium's perspective to maintain unity across such a vast empire, creates the perfect breeding ground for resentment. People who feel powerless begin to look for alternatives. Those who've lost everything to the uncaring machinery of the Imperium's bureaucracy seek revenge. The ambitious, who are denied advancement through legitimate means, are tempted by promises of power through other avenues. And into this fertile ground of discontent, chaos plants its seeds. The four major chaos gods each offer something different, something tailored to human weakness and desire. Khorne, the blood god, appeals to those consumed by rage and the desire for martial prowess. In a galaxy where violence is constant and life is cheap, Khorne's promise of strength through bloodshed resonates with soldiers tired of watching their comrades die, with workers brutalized by their overseers, with anyone who's been made to feel weak and wants the power to strike back. His cultists don't necessarily understand they're worshipping a chaos god at first. They might think they're praying to a warrior saint or an aspect of the Emperor himself. They conduct secret fight clubs, blood sports, gladiatorial contests. They tell themselves it's just stress relief, just a way to blow off steam. But with each death, with each skull claimed, they feed Khorne's power and draw his attention. Nurgle, the Plague Lord, offers acceptance and relief from suffering. In a universe where plague and disease are rampant, where medical care is a luxury most can't afford, where bodies break down from toxic working conditions and environmental contamination, Nurgle's promise of embracing decay instead of fighting it has a perverse appeal. His cults often begin as support groups for the sick and dying, communities that come together to care for those society has abandoned. They tell each other that suffering is natural, that decay is just another part of life's cycle, that death isn't something to fear. They practice folk medicine and use treatments that seem to help at first, but slowly, subtly, they begin to see disease not as something to cure, but as something to celebrate. They start to believe that Grandfather Nurgle loves them in a way the distant Emperor never could. Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure, targets those seeking sensation, perfection, or simply escape from the grinding monotony of imperial life. Artists, musicians, nobles bored with their privileged existence, workers who want more than endless labor, all can fall prey to Slaanesh's allure. The cult might begin as a philosophical society discussing banned literature, an art collective exploring forbidden aesthetics, or simply a group seeking pleasure through drugs, music, and sensual experiences. They convince themselves they're not doing anything wrong, that the Imperium's restrictions on such things are just another form of control. They chase ever greater heights of sensation, ever more perfect artistic achievement, ever more intense experiences. And with each new indulgence, they fall deeper into Slaanesh's grasp. Tzeentch, the changer of ways, appeals to those who crave knowledge, change, and the power that comes from understanding forbidden truths. In an Imperium that treats knowledge as dangerous and change as heretical, Tzeentch finds ready converts among scholars frustrated by restrictions on their research, psychers who want to understand their powers beyond the limited training the Imperium provides, and anyone who believes the rigid imperial system needs to change. His cults often disguise themselves as secret societies, fraternal organizations, or academic circles. They study forbidden law, practice unsanctioned sorcery, and pursue knowledge the Imperium has deemed too dangerous for mortal minds. They believe they're enlightening themselves, transcending the limitations the Imperium imposes. They don't realize they're dancing to a god's tune until it's far too late. The early days of a cult's formation are crucial. They must remain hidden, must avoid drawing the attention of the Arbites or, worse, the Inquisition. They recruit carefully, targeting the vulnerable, the angry, the curious. They use front organizations, legitimate businesses, charitable groups, even variants of the imperial cult itself, to mask their true nature. A workers' union agitating for better conditions might have a secret inner circle that worships corn. A monastery devoted to caring for plague victims might secretly serve Nurgle. An artists' collective might be a front for Slayonesh worship. A philosophical society might be studying the works of Tzeentch. The cult members wear their masks well. During the day, they're model citizens. They attend the mandatory prayer sessions. They inform on their neighbors for minor infractions to deflect suspicion. They work their shifts and pay their tithes and bow to the planetary governor's enforcers. But at night, in hidden chambers deep beneath the hive cities, in abandoned warehouses, in the private chapels of corrupt nobles, they gather to worship their dark gods. They perform rituals copied from forbidden texts. They make sacrifices, at first animal, then eventually human. They speak prayers in languages that hurt the mind to hear. They draw symbols that seem to writhe and move in the flickering candlelight. And slowly, very slowly, they grow in number and power. Each new recruit is a victory. Each successful ritual without detection is proof that their gods protect them. Each answered prayer, each small manifestation of unholy power, reinforces their belief that they've chosen the right path. They begin to see themselves as the enlightened few who understand the true nature of the universe, who've been granted secret knowledge denied to the mindless masses who worship the corpse emperor. They don't yet realize they're pawns in a game far beyond their comprehension. They don't understand that the chaos gods care nothing for their individual lives or dreams. They're tools to be used and discarded, fuel for powers that view mortal existence as barely more significant than we might view the lives of bacteria. But by the time they realize this truth, if they ever do, it's far too late to turn back. The cult grows. It spreads through families, through social networks, through professional associations. A factory worker recruits his shift supervisor. A noble brings her friends into the fold. A priest of the imperial cult, disillusioned by years of preaching to people who suffer endlessly despite their faith, begins to wonder if perhaps there are other gods who might actually answer prayers. The infection spreads from person to person, from district to district, from social class to social class. The rise of the cults, hidden among us. As the cult grows in size and confidence, it must become more sophisticated in its operations. What began as a handful of true believers meeting in secret becomes an organization that requires structure, hierarchy, and careful planning to avoid detection. The cult develops internal ranks, with the most devoted and powerful members forming an inner circle, while newer or less committed members remain on the periphery, often unaware of the cult's true nature and ultimate goals. The cult's public face becomes increasingly important. They establish front organizations that serve real, legitimate purposes while funneling resources and recruits to the hidden core. A charitable organization that provides food to the poor might be using its distribution network to identify vulnerable targets for recruitment. A merchant house that trades across the hive might be moving not just goods, but forbidden texts, cult paraphernalia, and messages between different cells. A labor union fighting for workers' rights might have a leadership that sees chaos as the ultimate revolution against an oppressive system. These fronts are carefully chosen to blend into the fabric of imperial society. In a hive world's administrative sector, the cult might disguise itself as a clerk's social club, using the trust and camaraderie of overworked bureaucrats to slowly introduce heretical ideas. In the underhive, they might pose as a gang or protection racket, indistinguishable from the countless other criminal enterprises that operate below the sight of imperial authorities. In noble circles, they might be a secretive art society or a philosophical discussion group where the wealthy and bored can indulge in forbidden knowledge without fear of being associated with common criminals. The cult's leadership typically emerges from those who show the greatest devotion or who demonstrate psychic potential. These are the cult demagogues, charismatic figures who can inspire others to greater acts of heresy, who can justify the increasingly horrific things the cult does in service to their dark gods. Some are true believers, utterly convinced of their chosen deity's righteousness. Others are cynical manipulators who see the cult as a path to personal power. Many are former imperial officials, priests who lost their faith, military officers cashiered for infractions, or nobles who've grown bored with conventional power and seek something more. These leaders conduct the cult's most important rituals, the ones that go beyond simple worship and begin to actively invoke the powers of chaos. They might use forbidden psychic abilities to contact entities in the warp, entities that whisper secrets and promises into their minds. They conduct increasingly elaborate sacrifices, sometimes of animals, sometimes of unwilling victims, kidnapped from the streets or taken from the ranks of the cult's enemies. They study ancient texts recovered from Xenos ruins or passed down through generations of cultists, learning rituals that were old when humanity first reached for the stars. As the cult's power grows, strange things begin to happen. Small at first, easily dismissed or ignored. A cultist who should have died from injuries survives through what seems like a miracle. Another develops the ability to influence people's thoughts, subtly at first, then more overtly. Objects in the cult's shrines seem to move on their own or whisper in languages no human should understand. The cult's leaders begin to display physical changes, marks of favor from their patrons, though they hide these carefully from outsiders. The cult also begins to infiltrate positions of real authority. A cultist who works in the administratum might alter records to hide the cult's activities or make their enemies disappear on paper. One who joins the Arbites can warn of upcoming raids or misdirect investigations. A cultist in the Planetary Defense Force can arrange for weapons to be lost in inventory, only to end up in the cult's hands. This infiltration is patient work, sometimes taking years or even decades, but it's essential for the cult's survival as it grows too large to hide entirely. Perhaps most insidiously, the cult begins to corrupt the imperial cult itself from within. They recruit priests and preachers who can twist the imperial creed's teachings to serve chaos. These corrupted clergy preach sermons that subtly introduce heretical concepts while maintaining a veneer of orthodoxy. They might emphasize the emperor's warrior aspect while secretly channeling devotion to Horn, or focus on accepting suffering as the emperor's will while actually serving Nurgle. The congregation doesn't realize they're being led astray. They think they're being model imperial citizens, attending services and offering prayers, while actually feeding power to the ruinous powers. The cult's meetings grow larger and more frequent. What started as small gatherings of a few believers become ceremonies involving dozens or even hundreds of participants. They meet in abandoned sectors of the hive, in caves beneath the city, in mansions where the wealthy can indulge without fear of the common law. These gatherings become increasingly elaborate, with ritualistic elements drawn from forbidden lore. They chant in languages that hurt the throat to speak and the ears to hear. They carve symbols into walls, floors, their own flesh. They offer sacrifices and conduct rites that would horrify any loyal imperial citizen. During these rituals, the barrier between the material world and the warp begins to thin. The cultists might catch glimpses of things that exist beyond reality, shadows of the demons that serve their gods. They hear voices, see visions, experience sensations that no mortal should be able to endure. Some go mad from these experiences. Others are strengthened in their conviction, seeing these horrors as proof that they have touched something real and powerful, something the Imperium's lies about the Emperor's protection can't match. The cult also begins to create its own infrastructure. They establish safe houses where members can hide from imperial authorities. They set up networks for distributing forbidden materials, for moving people between cells, for coordinating activities across different parts of the hive or even different cities. They develop codes and secret signs so members can recognize each other and communicate without being obvious. They create their own hierarchy of ranks and titles, often mocking the imperial system's rigid structure. Some cultists begin to develop mutations, physical changes that mark them as touched by chaos. These might be small at first, easily hidden beneath clothing. An extra finger, skin that changes color, eyes that glow faintly in the dark. The cult's leadership treats these as marks of favor, signs that the gods have noticed and blessed the individual. They teach the mutants to hide their changes from outsiders while displaying them proudly within the cult's gatherings. The mutations are tangible proof that their worship isn't in vain, that real power flows from their devotion. But not everyone in the cult is a true believer. Some join out of fear, having witnessed the cult's power and deciding it's safer to go along than to resist. Others are there for more mundane reasons: the social connections, access to resources, protection from hive gangs or other threats. These lukewarm members are often kept in the dark about the cult's true nature, forming outer circles that can be sacrificed if the cult is discovered. They think they're part of a fraternal organization or political movement, not understanding the depth of heresy at the cult's core. As months turn to years, the cult becomes embedded in the world's society, like cancer in living